Welcome to the JTV Caribbean News. I am Sean Rose. At least one person is dead and 4 are missing in Haiti after rains triggered mudslides and flooding that damaged more than 10,000 homes, the country's Civil Protection Office said on Monday. Edgard Celestine, a spokesman with the office, said one man died while helping a person across the overflowing Dame Marie River. One body was found and the other person and 3 farmers are missing. The heaviest damage happened in northern Haiti, where 10,000 homes between Cap Haitien and Lemonade were damaged by flooding. Poor drainage in Cap Haitien and an overflowing river triggered the second major flooding incident in recent weeks. The rains and flood damage came as the El Nino weather phenomenon has led to some of the worst drought conditions in Haiti in years. The country is also currently facing its worst food crisis since 2001. The World Food Programme and Haiti's National Food Security Coordination Unit say farmers are facing up to 70% crop losses as a result of the drought. The losses have doubled the number of food insecure people in the country since September. History was made on Wednesday when the Bahamas Parliament passed 4 amendments to the Constitution, removing the remaining vestiges of discrimination from the law books. 37 of the 38 legislators voted in favor of the bill. The other parliamentarian, Hubert Chipman, was absent due to illness. Last weekend, Attorney General Alison Maynard Gibson QC said 4 issues would be voted upon in Parliament and later by the people in a referendum. The bills passed include whether a married Bahamian woman should have the same right as a married Bahamian man to pass her citizenship on to her child, whether the spouse of a Bahamian woman should have the same right as the spouse of a Bahamian man to become a Bahamian citizen, and whether an unmarried Bahamian man should have the same right as an unmarried Bahamian woman to pass his citizenship on to his child. Gibson said it should be clear in the country's constitution that there will not be discrimination in the Bahamas on the basis of sex, being male and female. In his closing remarks after the passage of the bills, Bahamas Prime Minister Perry Christie commended House members for their vote and underscored the historic significance of the occasion within the context of the rights of women to vote, a franchise granted to them in 1962, more than 1/2 century ago. The bills, once approved by the Senate, must be approved by a majority of voters in a referendum if the constitutional changes are to be made. And over in Bermuda, Bermuda's Minister of Community, Culture and Sports, Patricia Gordon Pamplin, tabled a draft consultation copy of the Civil Union Act 2016 in the House of Assembly, which seeks to make provision for the formalization of a relationship between same-sex adult couples. The bill's explanatory memorandum says, this bill seeks to make provision for the formalization and registration of a relationship between same-sex adult couples to be known as a civil union. Minister Gordon Pamplin stated that some members of the House of Assembly said that while they might support equality for same-sex couples, they would not support the bill as the politics are too thorny. Others say they do not support the equality for same-sex couples, but some support full equality. Bermuda Premier Michael Dunkley announced that government intends to table a referendum bill so that the people can express their opinions on same-sex marriage and civil unions via the referendum. And in related news, could the developments in Bahamas and Bermuda on equal rights and same-sex marriage spark similar motions across the Caribbean? More in this report from HTS News Force.
Last month, Bahamian Chief Justice Sir Hartman Longley called for the swift holding of a referendum, stating that equal rights for women should not be delayed by critics who say that an amendment to the Constitution would facilitate the legality of same-sex marriage. The issue of gender equality is part of a long-delayed constitutional referendum for the Bahamas that hit a snag in 2013. It will now take place this week. Bahamian representatives at this week's security training workshop organized by LGBT group United and Strong are hoping that this will spark interest in and demand for gender equality across the Caribbean.
Well, I think it's good that the Bahamas is now coming on board as far as equality is concerned, and the referendum is actually scheduled for this week, Wednesday, so we know how the outcome comes. I think it is progress for our country, meaning that persons can have the same rights as everybody else. So I think it's a good step in the correct direction for our country. It is going to have I would call it a domino effect, especially for persons who are in tourism industry, persons who are in health industry. It's going to have a domino effect because humans are humans, and you have to respect the rights of humans, no matter if you're from Africa, India, Jamaica, Bahamas, wherever. Humans are humans, and I think it is going to have a domino effect.
Joan Didier is the director of the AIDS Action Foundation and a board member of the Caribbean Vulnerable Communities Coalition. She says the referendum in the Bahamas holds important lessons for the OECS, where same-sex relationships are still frowned upon.
In all of our countries, buggery is an offense on the books. So even before we start to talk about same-sex marriage, we need to address that issue. People in same-sex relationships, people who perceive themselves to be who know that they are different in the way they love, in the way they want to live, are subject to a lot of stigma and discrimination in our countries. And that hinders their health-seeking behavior, their sexual and reproductive health-seeking behavior. And we need to address that first before we can even think of same-sex marriages.
This week, the Premier of Bermuda, Michael Dunkley, announced that his government will hold a referendum on the controversial issue of same-sex marriage and civil union in the British Overseas Territory during this legislative session. He conceded that there is, quote, incredible passion and emotion about same-sex unions, end quote, and said government would undertake soul-searching and reflection on the issue. Participants in the regional workshop taking place in St. Lucia say the developments in the Bahamas and Bermuda will ensure that the discussion on same-sex unions continues to be a priority.
And finally, in this week's Caribbean News segment, despite being in the midst of a corruption trial, former Premier of the Turks and Caicos Islands, Michael Missick, is throwing his hat into the political ring again in that British Overseas Territory's upcoming elections. Elections must be held no later than February 2017, and Missick, who led the Turks and Caicos Islands from 2003 to 2009 before resigning, said he intended to put forward himself as a candidate for the ruling Progressive National Party, the PNP. Missick stated on his Facebook page, quote, "The struggle to free our beloved island from colonial rule and lead them into true progress and prosperity that includes justice for all Awi begins with the successful re-election of the PNP. Missick has submitted his name to the party he led to 2 general election victories for consideration in the constituency of North and Middle Caicos, the constituency where he was born and which is currently represented by his nephew, Donahue Gardiner, who is also Minister of Immigration and Labor. Missick and several other former government ministers and their associates are facing charges of conspiracy to accept bribes in public office, conspiracy to defraud and associated money laundering brought by a special investigative team set up in the Turks and Caicos Islands in 2011. The case is being heard before Justice Paul Harrison. That's it for the JTV Caribbean News. I am Sean Rose.
And coming up next on JTV News. A recital ceremony at the Rotong Methodist Church marks the 21st H. Lafferty Stout celebrations on March 7th. Petroleum Safety Campaign seeks to improve awareness about petroleum disasters and prevention. President of the Athletics Association, Dean Greenaway, welcomes the upgrades to the rubberized track at the A.O. Shirley Recreation Grounds and looks forward to upgrades to other facilities, including seating. And in our Hot Trends segment, we feature the start of auditions for the first ever Gen Y Factor Talent Showcase and Competition.